Bugs make up an estimate of 70 to 80% of our global animal population. They have amazing ecological benefits. They are pollinators, they are decomposers, they are cleaners, and they're a food source for a wide array of animals. So why aren't we doing more for them? They do so much for us. Before I continue, I think it's really important to acknowledge that when I use the term bug, I'm using a generic term to describe terrestrial arthropods, spiders, worms, anything you'd call a creepy crawly, I suppose, bugs. My background in entomology is quite short-lived. I spent a lot of last year as a citizen scientist. I took part in the 100-Year Moth Project, which just included collecting specimens throughout New Zealandia, and I also did some databasing for the New Zealand mosquito census late last year, so that's sort of my history. I conducted a survey at the beginning of the week to get a rough idea of the general public's opinions on bugs, and what I noticed is when I asked them to rate the importance of bugs from a scale of 1 to 10, vast majority of them gave it between an 8 and a 10. So they understand the importance, but the thing is they're not seeing information on bugs often. There's that lack of public information. So this is about 74%, this red here. So people just aren't seeing that information around, which is a huge issue because it causes misinformation. A really common one I can think of in context of New Zealand is the white-tailed spider. What happened was in the early 2000s, there was a misreport of a spider bite. And then everyone sort of thought to believe that these spiders were venomous to humans when in fact they weren't. But by the time the myth was debunked, it was too late. So a huge chunk of New Zealanders still believe that whitetails are venomous, which is a really harmful myth. According to New Zealand Geographic, we are losing insects 2.5% a year in the past 3 decades. And considering they're the most abundant animals on Earth and we're losing them at such a high rate. The issue is we don't have a lot of data in New Zealand. This is from stats.gov.nz. This here represents our terrestrial invertebrates from 2010 to 2018. You see here, this grey section, which represents about a third, is data deficient, which means that they are unable to record the conservation status of all these terrestrial invertebrates. And if you think of how many terrestrial invertebrates we have in New Zealand, a third is such a huge amount to be data deficient in. There's also 0 places you can study entomology, arachnology, anything of that nature in New Zealand. So we lack the educational opportunities we need, because there are so many careers in scientific fields that require entomologists, but the thing is we just lack them because we are not giving them the education they need. They cannot be qualified enough for these. In the context of New Zealand, insects have made such a huge impact on Maori history. So for example, the ghost moths, we have about 28 species. They're all endemic to New Zealand. In the past they were used for food, bait, they were crushed up for pigment for moko, traditional tattooing, and they were seen as these sacred animals. They were seen as messengers. So to respect these insects is to respect Maori culture and Maori history. And obviously we need to start protecting these species. A good example are our giant weta. I'm aware that DOC is actually starting to do a lot for them, which is such great progress that we're making. But there's a big chunk of our giant weta species that are vulnerable, data deficient, or endangered, which is a huge issue because they are seed dispersers and they're also a great food source for a lot of our native birds, which obviously we're trying so hard to protect. Another one is our New Zealand praying mantis. The issue is that in the late 70s, the South African species came in. They started mating with the New Zealand species. The South African species, they consume after copulation, New Zealand species don't. So what's happening is whenever the female South African praying mantis mates with the New Zealand male, she consumes him, which is a huge issue obviously because we're getting less New Zealand males and the females are running out of mates to reproduce with. this is our only native mantid in the entire country. The issue is that we don't have the research or the resources to actually see at what rate they are declining. So, in conclusion, it's really important that we take part in entomological research. Not only is it protecting our species that affects our entire ecosystem, it's also respecting Maori history and culture, right? So I hope you understand the case that I'm making for why entomology needs to be highlighted more, especially in New Zealand, and why we need more opportunities in public education. Thank you.